Hey guys, welcome back to the Joe Silverback Show. I'm your host, Joe Bunton, and the next two videos that we're going to do are going to be on E.O. Wilson's monumental work, Biophilia and Consilience. Edward Wilson, I've talked about him many, many times, and as he's entering, in the last decade of his life, his work has to be deeply, deeply considered, and we need to see if we can utilize his great intelligence before he crosses the great river. Biophilia is essentially the love of life, and Wilson has, as a biologist first and as a sociobiologist second, Wilson has very, very poignantly and pointedly shown how inside all human beings is this love of life. We go to the seashore, we go to the mountains, we, have some reverence for the bald eagle or the brown bears, catching salmon, the butterfly, the hummingbird, the pelican, the great blue whale. As much as we are man the destroyer, man the conqueror, man the, the one who's too smart, that he is stupid in our, destructive nature, conquering and everything in our path, we also have this amazing resilience that bounces back, that springs back. It's not actually a resilience, it's the soul. It's the connection of the hereditary, evolutionary awareness that the living earth is the source of our livelihood, and we owe a great debt to creation. So whether that's an awareness that without the sun we will perish, whether that's an awareness without water we will perish, whether that's an awareness without preserving great tracts of creation through national monuments, natural parks, and through preserving the waterways, the skyways, the earthways, those mega fauna and megaflora, great plant and animal species that we admire and revere so much, will no longer be part of our what we can pass on to our children. And that is part of the biophilia hypothesis, part of the biophilia connection that we have to heart, mind, to soul. And the Silverback principle, as I have mentioned before, is deeply connected to the biosphere and the ecological area that he inhabits, and has a consciousness that we all need to emulate through our meditations, through our prayers, through our religious practices. We need to bring the Silverback consciousness into our awareness of being the protector provider, but being the protector also of the natural habitat that sustains us. In consilience, it's a masterful work of a brilliant mind and a deep heart-centered human being whose life is dedicated to the education through research, through study, through biological experimentation. And one of the critical, so consilience, so biophilia is the love of life, consilience is unity of knowledge. With the love of life, with a possibility of having a universal collaboration on all the different specialties from the natural sciences to the social sciences, ethics and religion. We need to come together as we move forward as more and more the co-creators of this great creation that we're part of. So whether or not we're talking about Yuval Harari's Homo Deus or Sapiens, or whoever you want to, bring into the conversation in terms of, okay, this is our evolutionary history. Now, where do we want to go from here? There are big questions that are needing to be answered. So there's a couple components to this. And that's why I'm saying that this is a two-part series on consilience and biophilia, because it's so vast, and maybe we're gonna need two more parts after that, and you guys will have all kinds of great questions and comments and feedback and stuff that you want me to add to this conversation. But let's start with where we are and maybe go backwards a little bit and then maybe go forwards a little bit. So where we are in terms of, I've mentioned you guys to watch the Yuval Harari and Fei Li conversation that is looking at where AI is now and where AI is going. And one of the things that I am clear that Harari has been inspired by is E.O. Wilson's great monumental works. So Harari asks some good questions. Let's look at what E.O. Wilson says when in his last chapter of Consilience, to what end? To what end? He asks some very, very good questions, and I'd like to I'd like to bring those to light here. So first of all, if we do get to the point where Harari's pointing and Fei Li and Harari's conversation is indicating that historian philosophers like Harari are looking at, which I don't say we're there, but what I do say is be prepared, and let us all be prepared, and through preparation let us all contribute to the dialogue. So part of that dialogue is one of the things that Wilson is pointing at as geneticists map the genome, the human genome. So imagine, a chain of, I don't know how many thousands of genes. You guys can look it up. And each one of those genes are being mapped and isolated. Okay? So if we, happen to have a gene that the geneticist sees leads to cancer, if we happen to have a gene that happens to lead to autism, if we happen to want to, as we have thought of, looked at already, change anything on the physical structure of, the human being that we want to create. The Human Genome Project is the idea of picking out the bad and putting in the good, or picking in the good. You can see by my by my expressions that I have my faith in the seed and my faith in creation and my faith in nature, and not in human selectivity. So in order to come to a point where you can make your own, draw your own conclusions, I think it's really, really worthwhile to study natural history and to study evolutionary biology and to study evolutionary psychology and to study evolutionary sociology, to study primatology, to study enough where, or at least to listen to enough thinkers where you can make some of your own conclusions about whether or not, or to what degree, you're comfortable with manipulating human nature. So we've been practicing on mice, we've been practicing on bugs, we've been practicing on rats, we've been practicing on plants, we've been practicing on all kinds of sentient beings and biological organisms for a few hundred years now, and we have been manipulating nature to in very significant ways. So I don't want to pretend that AI and where we're going with technology is not part of some larger continuum. It is. But AI and the human genome mapping is two of the human manipulations of biological nature, and the attempt at and the pretense to recreate human nature. Those are the two biggest areas that I think are on our plate today, worthy of this discussion. So let's just take human emotion, human feeling, human heart-centered, soul connection, spirit evolved feeling that allows us as human beings to not just destroy and be destructive, but also allows us to be good to another human being, be kind to another human being, be generous, be noble, put a helping hand out, adopt an infant who needs help, go into another country or go into another uncomfortable zone where we can bring our skills and talents and knowledge and resources and help other people. This is all connected to biophilia, the love of life and the love of helping other living organisms. And it's the same thing that can allow me to see the California coastal oak on the rolling hills up in Central California and know that I'm home. It's the same thing that can allow all of us to go into Yosemite Valley and be in awe as with awareness that God's presence is here more than it is anywhere else that we've ever seen. It is the same ecstatic, rapturous joy that we get climbing, mountain peaks and being at the top of the mountain and looking down and being pumped up and having this adrenaline rush and being in the zone. So this is part one of the biophilia, love of life hypothesis that's connected to the Silverback principle, which is we do love life, we do love our children, we do love our loved ones, and we do love our pets, we do love outside of ourselves, we do love the dolphins leaping out of the water, we do love watching the pelicans glide over the sea. We do love to know that, the blue whale is still there, and pods of gray whales are migrating down south. We have a deep, deep love of the living universe and the living creation of which we are part of. And the conversation begins here. How's the best way to keep nature outside in as much flourishing state as possible through and connected to keeping nature inside flourishing, keeping the human heart and the human soul flourishing? Namaste. Join me for part 2 also, guys.